was diagnosed with primary when I was 42. 2 years later is when I got the diagnosis of secondary breast cancer.
I had my breast removed in Brisbane, and I had follow-up chemo for 6 months, and after that I was placed on tamoxifen for 5 years. Had no problems while I was taking tamoxifen, but within a month of going off the tamoxifen, had a lump came back up on my chest, which I was told was just the cancer had come back.
And I have been living with secondary breast cancer now for 5 years. It was a great disappointment to be diagnosed with secondary cancer because I was about to celebrate being 10 years past the initial diagnosis.
When I was told that the cancer was back, it was a shock, mainly because I think on my first initial diagnosis, after I'd had my breast removed and the lymph glands done, and the doctors had said they had got all the cancer, even though it was a microscopic cancer. They said, we've got it all. Take tamoxifen for 5 years and you'll be fine. The success rate is a lot better. And then because I'd gone 5 years with no problems, there was no sign of any of the cancer back. And then to go off the tamoxifen, and within a month I had the cancer back in my sternum. And the doctor just said, your cancer's back.
And it was like having a series of hurdles put in front of me, and every time you get over one, there'd be another one just around the corner. And it was just, it was a constant battle for the first at least 6 months, because then you're going into the chemo with the every 3 weeks bit, and your blood being good on 1 week, not good the next week. And it was, really quite a difficult time, but you just have to do what you had to do. You haven't got any choice, really. Staying on top of it was hard, but luckily I had Jim to support me with that. So, and it's funny because it's been 5 years down the track now. You can't remember the specifics, but you get over it, and eventually you do accept it. It's your lot. It's the way your cards have been dealt. And I've never ever asked why me, which is good. I think I've just said, well, I've got it. I'm just going to do the best I can with what I've got.
At first it was, it's hard to tell your family. Especially for me, because because I wasn't told it was advanced breast cancer. I was just told it was cancer. So it was like a double shock really for them, because you say, I've got the cancer back, but we're going to have chemo and treat it. And then when you find out that it's terminal, you've then got to go and tell them, this is what's, it is terminal. And it's more of a shock for them, I think, and that accepting that, we are going to die from it. But so that sort of makes it harder for you then as well, because you've got to sort of help them along as well as yourself, that until they get over the shock of it as well.
Basically, I got my husband to do a lot of the ringing around. He's very matter of fact, whereas I'm a very emotional person at the best of times. So he did the block, and we also do the emails are excellent because you can type it all out and then send it to the family and friends, and that was good. So I recommend email to anybody, and you can answer them when you want to, and it doesn't disturb your sleep as well. So, email's best.
People don't understand that while getting a diagnosis of secondary breast cancer is pretty serious, it may mean that it's gone to your bones only, and that's may be very painful in some instances, or in my case, just annoying at certain intervals, and it could mean that you keep on keeping on without much change to your lifestyle. So in that respect, I think both my husband and I have kept it fairly private. My family obviously know, my extended family know, and my very good friends know. But other than that, it is not a topic of conversation. Not many people would know. And I suspect the rumour mill has worked overtime though, and I'd say lots of people probably know who I haven't told, but at least they're respectful enough to not be talking about it if I don't choose to.
With my kids, I told them straight away. My son was living with me then at the time, so I was just come home and told him, and my daughter was living away at that time, so I had to ring her and tell her. And my parents, I sort of left them for as long as possible. I actually went through my father. I told him first and said, "No, I'll leave it up to you now to tell Mum."
Some friends have become annoyingly sympathetic, and others just treat you as normal, which is good. And I find that you can still make new friends, which is amazing, because if you're in an area where they don't know that you're living with secondary breast cancer, well, they just accept you as normal anyway. And the relationship does change, because if there's a challenge in a relationship, it becomes a little bit unequal at times, and I think that does affect things, because if you're in a partnership of equality and suddenly one needs more than the other, and one is giving more than the other can, it does change things. Oh, it's terrifying the first time you have any of these treatments. The first time you have chemotherapy, you don't know how you're going to react. You don't know what's going to happen to your body. They say this may happen. I was fine through the first chemotherapy until at the end my body was just so very tired. But this second time that I've had chemotherapy, I had the first dose of chemotherapy and I couldn't hold anything down, not even water, and I ended up in hospital being rehydrated, because as you become dehydrated, I'm telling you, you just leave this planet. Your mind just is so strange. And my husband could see that I was not handling things very well, and rang the doctor and said, "Look, really, you have to do something." And it was only when I got into the hospital and was rehydrated that I started sort of being sensible again. And that was a shock, because that was exactly the same chemo that I'd had before. But because I was ill, I'd lost 12 kilos, and the cancer was on the rampage in my body. I wasn't as well as I was when I had the first chemo, so it was much more devastating on my body. Similarly with the radium treatment, it was terrifying. And they're kind, they handle it all so very well down there, but it doesn't quell your anxiety completely. And it's the same with all the new drugs that you take. You wonder what's going to happen.
Side effects with the chemo for me, I've put on 20 kilos since my chemo started in probably in the last 3 years, and which isn't very good. But other side effects are that I've lost my hair. This is the second time I've lost my hair now. The first time it was just about bald. But it all grew back nice and curly, and it was really good. First time I've ever had curly hair since I was a baby. This time my hair's just thinned out really badly, and I've lost my eyebrows. And other side effects are you get nauseated, Taxotere makes you constipated, and dexamethasone that I'm on for the aftercare, I get bloated, and it puts a lot of pressure on your ribs and your diaphragm and everything, so you have trouble breathing, and you sort of, like, a long conversation is not something you can have. You've got to stop and catch your breath, so you sort of sound like you've got really bad asthma or something like that. But that sort of goes, for me, it goes after about 5 days, and I'm back to, I start picking up again, getting ready for my next lot of chemo.
To get the information about your medications is difficult because you don't at first think you're entitled to it, but then the best person to ask is your oncologist nurse, because she's dealing with it every day and she's got more time to talk to you. Unfortunately, the oncologists are extremely busy people. So you're there when you're getting your chemo for 4 hours, you've got time to talk.
You could ask the nurses in palliative care where you're getting your chemo and stuff. They're very good with giving you all the information that they can on what happens. To me, they're the best source of information, and that if you want to know something, ask them. And then if they can't give you the information, well, then go maybe back to your doctor or Google it on the internet.
There's BC Met sites, which is like a forum, and I really suggest that people if they get told of a tablet or treatment they're on, to get it written down, because some of these tablets and things, they're really long words. So if you can do it on the internet yourself, there's an awful lot of information there. But if you have to be proactive, though, to ask for that information.
One of the things I think is very important is looking after yourself in these situations, and acknowledging that you might have a high state of anxiety which might inhibit your ability to take in information. So in that regard, I think that it's important always to have someone with you. Doctors, unfortunately, are busy. Unfortunately, they're doing this time and time again. So when they're delivering the information, it is rapidly delivered, and it's delivered in such a way that they assume that people can readily take in the medical terms. I really strongly suggest that everything they say should be written down as well, and there be some sort of handout given if they're using medical terminology, because we've, in our computer, in our favourites, is the medical dictionary, so we can go straight to that and find out what on earth they have been talking about.
I must admit, I felt like I didn't ask too many questions because I felt the doctor knew everything, and it wasn't until I joined the support group and other people were talking about what sort of treatment they were on and explaining it to me, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not even sure what I am on and what are the side effects. So it empowered me to ask more questions with a certain degree of confidence in asking those questions.
Just after I was diagnosed with secondary breast cancer, a friend of ours came to Cairns from Mackay, and she happened to be a breast care nurse from Mackay. And she told me about this group in Brisbane where the people in Brisbane were able to meet once a week and support each other. And they were opening the group to country residents via a telephone hookup.
The support group works by joining women from all over Queensland and Brisbane-based women as well, and we go to West End, or some people ring in, and it's where we can talk honestly and openly and share our journey with other women going through similar situations. I get scans Friday. I've had 7 weeks of chemo, so I'm a bit nervous and hesitant about what's going to happen because the tumour in the liver's big. So whatever the news is, it'll either be a just continue on, or I might have to change chemos. It was a life support for me when I found out about the group, because at that stage I didn't know that there was any support for secondary breast cancer. There was an awful lot for primary, but we seem to have just been left to our own devices.
I first found out about the group from my doctor that I was seeing at the time. It was not long after I found out that it was actually advanced breast cancer, and that I was having a bit of a hard time dealing with it. He was going to work one day and heard Mary and Pierre on the radio, and so he got onto them, got their phone number, got onto them, and organised for me to ring them up, or they rang me, and we sort of just went from there.
How are you, Pam? It's Kate.
Not bad. Been a bit crook with this new treatment though.
What treatment are you on now?
Yeah, I don't know. But it's only a short treatment. I have 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and do it just once, like on a Friday.
When I first found out about the group, I wondered whether it would be for me. I was feeling very raw at the time, and wasn't sure how it would be ringing in to a group who were meeting face to face in Brisbane. Luckily, soon after, I had a chance to go to Brisbane and see the setup down there. So then when I came back to Cairns, it was easy to visualise everyone in the room and their mannerisms and things like that. That helped me considerably. It helped me definitely through that difficult first time, because you really don't know how long you have. It's such an open-ended thing, really. As I found out now 5 years later.
Mary and Pierce provide the stability, because even though we might be having a bad week or something and too sick, we know that they'll still be there. And they also are the keepers of a lot of information and knowledge, and I think it's their role to pass that on to future women coming through the group. They've learnt almost as much as we have. Even though they haven't walked in our shoes, they still hear the stories. And initially I was a bit dazed by their involvement, how the group would work, but it was explained to me that it's our group, not their group, and we are the ones that conduct the agenda for the day and talk about what we want to do, talk about, and not them. But they keep bringing it back every now and then to get us to talk about our emotions and feelings.
I think the calmness that Mary and Pierre as group leaders conduct the group with is a bonus as well, because people can come in extremely upset, but we don't necessarily leave that way because of their careful direction of that particular group meeting.
The group offered me talking to other women and knowing how I can live. The doctors give you the prognosis that you are going to die, and he treats your body and the disease. However, the women teach you living until you do die. So we just bandy around, so sharing of knowledge, whether it's medical or financial help. It's great, and also just hanging out with each other, going for coffee. It's a girl thing, I suppose.
Worrying about whether the group was going to be morbid certainly wasn't a concern for me, because I was morbid at the time. Because when you are first diagnosed with secondary breast cancer, the practitioners, your health practitioners you're seeing, kindly reinforce the fact that this is fatal, that this is how you're going to end your life. So you're living at the first, knowing that there are things you're doing for the last time. And through the group, I've learnt that I can discard that thought and I can actually live, and hopefully things won't be for the last time. Because through the group, I've seen people after various treatments lasting for more years, And here am I, 5 years past, and I certainly am not morbid, and I don't find the group morbid.
The group has enabled me to come out of my shell, because up until this group, I never talked to anybody about what I was going through. I'd keep it all bottled up, and that was, the group has brought me out of myself, and I find I can talk to them and know that they would more likely have answers for me than other people that don't know what we're going through, and we're all going through the same thing.
The group does allow you to talk about death and preparation for it. We often talk about wills, what will happen to our families afterwards. We talk about funerals, we talk about eulogies, and it all helps to prepare us and I think to move to a state of grace, I think, before the end. And I've seen it time and time again in the group, the calmness with which the people are approaching their imminent death, and it is just remarkable that they can share that with us, which helps strengthen us.
Unfortunately, death is part of life, and it's part of the disease. And by putting your head in the sand isn't going to stop you from dying. But if you take your head out of the sand and learn and pass on knowledge and enjoy life, which these women and this group encourages you to do, it's making the most of your life.
I'd recommend the group to others because I think it's one of the few places where I can be honest, really honest. Amongst my friends, I have people who tell me to keep being the positive person I am, whereas in the group we know that you accept the condition and live positively. Whereas, a lot of my friends annoy me by saying that you can overcome this disease with positivity, which in the group, at least, we realise that it unfortunately is stronger than us.
I can certainly say from my experience it saved my life, mentally, because I saw these women living well and making the most of their life, which is great. When I got told I had the advanced breast cancer, I didn't know how soon I was going to die, because you instantly think, oh well, I'm going to die next week. You've got no sort of time frame and nobody tells you. And from experience now, I know it's different for other people. Some people get 3 years, other people get 10 years, so there isn't any set time. But you don't know that. You just think you're getting a life sentence. However, the disease is only a life-limiting disease. So you're still living, and that's when I had to then work out what I can and can't do.
When the cancer returned, I thought, oh, this is it. I'll need to make preparations for alerting my husband to the fact that he might have to become my carer. But I had the chemotherapy, and that was in 2005. 2006, we travelled overseas, thinking in the back of our minds, never expressing it, that this was the last big trip. Our daughter was over in Canada on exchange, so we met up with her and then travelled home through Europe with her, which was fantastic. But here am I in 2007, after doing all of that, after having radium last Christmas, and here am I applying for a part-time job. I'm feeling so well and feeling that I still have something to give, and I can still live in that way as well. I still have to be careful. I'm tireder than I've ever been before. My body tells me when I'm overdoing things, but it's so exciting really that with such a terrible thing as secondary breast cancer, you can still have such a life.
Well, that's the thing about this disease. You do have your good days and your bad days. And the thing is, when you have your bad days, you stay in bed. And I have never ever had a problem with staying in bed. I've got a motto, 10 o'clock or 10 degrees, whichever comes first. And I love reading books, so I just accept I'm having a bad day. But that doesn't happen all that often to me. I've been pretty lucky, really. But it makes you appreciate your good days even more. I'm going on holidays overseas next week. I'm hesitant about it because I think, well, what if something happens, and how am I going to do this? Because walking up hills is any slope is hard for me, but I'm going to do it. I'm still alive, so I'm still above ground and vertical. So you appreciate those every day.
Some days it's hard because you really. Some days I just don't want to get out of bed. You sort of drag yourself out and make yourself get up and have breakfast or have something to eat later in the day if you're feeling not too good in the morning. Basically, I just come up with the philosophy. I've got to keep living, and I try not to let it get to me too much. But when I do have my bad days, well, I just sort of really bad day. I'll just lay around and not do anything. But then I sort of think, well, at the moment it's only 1 or 2 days out of the week. So I sort of think I'm entitled that you just lay around and just try and let the sickness get over.
As a modern person with secondary breast cancer, I think that there are a lot of options as long as you're keeping relatively good health. You can choose, if you want to retire. If that's what you choose to do, that's fine. And I've enjoyed certain elements of retirement, I can tell you. I've enjoyed the idea of travelling because you've realised that time might be limited. The idea that every day is precious becomes very intense for a while, and then after a while life returns to normal, and you find that people still say offensive things even though you're living with secondary breast cancer. You find that you apply for a job and you don't get it even though you're living with secondary breast cancer. Shouldn't they be more sympathetic? And after a while you realise that you're just normal, and with a slight challenge of living with secondary breast cancer, if you're well, of course. And the strange thing about living with secondary breast cancer is that you can have great dips in your health. And when that happened in 2005 with me, suddenly I had an influx of rallies coming to show sympathy and help. And then I got well, much to their surprise. So they went home and life gets back to normal again. It's, the ups and downs of it can be a bit of a challenge. And for me personally, the challenge is wondering if I can do some sort of paid work part-time somewhere and, contribute still, to the family income, to life. That still seems to be important to me. Mind you, if I can't get anything, I'm still enjoying life as it is.
I occupy my time by working. I enjoy going to work, even though I can't do as much as I used to. I enjoy getting out of the house and interacting with other people away from here, and people that don't know what I'm going through. So you're not thinking, oh, what are they going to say today or whatever. But I also go shopping. We do a lot of window shopping just to get out and get away and relax. And I visit friends, and I'm planning a trip down to my parents next week, and that because I haven't seen them for quite a few months. So you can plan to do things in between your treatments when you're feeling well. But basically, I sort of just try not to dwell on what's going on and just do things that I want to do, and that when I want to do them.
Changes, I've eliminated negative people out of my life, in negative things. I don't watch the news as much or anything violent. I'd rather just watch happy things and just probably laugh more than I've ever laughed. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Being in Cairns has got a disadvantage because we are removed from centres of service for treatment of cancer. For example, if you need radium treatment, you have to go to Townsville. Sometimes people are sent to Brisbane, and that can be an inconvenience. Fortunately, there's a government scheme, a patient travel scheme. If your specialist has said that you have to go to Brisbane or to Townsville, your travel's covered. And in the case of my having to go to Brisbane just before Christmas, my husband was also covered to come with me because it was a fairly traumatic thing to sort of be having the first extensive radium treatment with no support. And that's the problem. Not everyone has relatives or friends in the cities where they have to get treatment. The Cancer Council have set up an accommodation centre in Townsville, which is wonderful. There's similar sorts of things in Brisbane which go to help, and we should be grateful for that. But it is important too to have family, friend support when you're in these difficult times as well.
That's the lucky thing about living in a big city, is that I got access to capable people with choices. If I don't like one doctor, I can go down the hallway and go to another one. Whereas that's the thing about the rural women, I really don't know how they cope, and they have to wait weeks to get results from the scans. Whereas in Brisbane, if we don't have them in a couple of hours, we get cranky. So no, I'm very lucky, and my hospital's on a train line, so it's easy access. I like my oncologist, I like my radiation lady and the nurses, so I've got a good team working on my side now. So,
because with the treatment that I'm having, I lost my hair, and being a female, you sort of think you do need something if you're going out, or you just want to make yourself look a bit better. And that I was sort of thinking, I'm going to have to go and buy a wig, and I'd already priced them years ago when I first started chemo treatment because I was told I'd lose my hair. And I found that they were really expensive to get one that looked a little bit like your hair, not like a mop sitting on your head. So I rang the Cancer Council here in Rocky, and they were really good about it once I explained that I was looking to buy a wig, and asked if there was any way that they could help pay some of the cost of a wig for me, and they just said, no, we'll pay for the whole lot. You just come up and fill out the forms, take it down to the hairdresser here that works with them, and they will fit you for a wig, and they send the bill back to the Cancer Council and they pay for it, and you don't have to have any cost to you at all, which is really good. And because I haven't had reconstruction surgery done, I need to have a prosthesis, and because of the changing shape of your body all the time, you have to keep updating and resizing. And my prosthesis that I had, I was just making do with it because that time I didn't know. I knew you can get a prothesis on a pension. They supply one every 2 years, I think it is. But because I wasn't on a pension and I had no money, I rang the Cancer Council again and said, my prothesis is actually broken. It was leaking, and I said, is there any help that you can give for that? And they said, yes, we will supply it. We will pay for it. And same thing again. You fill out forms, go to the chemist or the bra shop who supply them, and you get fitted. They send the bill back to the Cancer Council, and it's no cost to you again, and that they are really good in that respect.
There's no time frame. Some people perhaps take longer than others, but the amazing thing I've discovered about the human condition through the whole of this experience is that it takes a lot to quench that little flame of hope in people. It is just amazing. You can be feeling absolutely wretched, and then you get some medication, you get some help, you get some counselling, you do something pleasant for yourself, and suddenly this little spark comes to the surface to say, well, I'm still here, I can still enjoy it, and it's so sustaining, and it's just incredible.
The most important thing is that it's not an immediate a death. Like, it's not something that I'm going to die real quickly, or I'm not going to be here for much longer. That we can be here for years. I know other women in the group have been, for 4 or 5 years after their diagnosis, they're still here, still fighting it. So there is, it's not an immediate death sentence, which is the main thing you need to know.
I suggest that women learn about their disease as much as possible, use the internet, ask questions, ask a lot of questions, write things down, and get a portacath in as soon as you get told you've got secondaries, so that it doesn't damage your veins, because your life is now going to be a series of scans regularly to keep monitoring you, and the healthier your veins are, the better it is to get scans. And really just enjoy quality of life, get rid of negatives, and eat a lot of chocolate.
A doctor said to me, Fran, this is your own journey. No one can be in your shoes, but we will walk beside you. And I think for anyone in this situation, they need to know there are many people willing to walk beside them, and the people in this group are certainly there